Hi there. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before the committee in support of this bill. I am the person Nick referred to who did an updated look at the portrait of incarcerated debtors in the state in 2015, so that's the research I'm going to speak to tonight. So, Rhode Island is a nationwide pioneer in passing the original legislation from 2008 that is really designed to protect low-income defendants from being saddled with administrative fees paying to the state that they are unable to pay. But as my colleagues here have shared, the promise of the original legislation has not been met because even as of 2015, I found that the courts were not systematically determining defendants' ability to pay, and they were automatically issuing warrants for arrest for anyone who failed to appear and pay. So I worked with Open Doors in 2015 to recreate the study that Nick described. I reviewed data on all 8,000 people who were committed to the ACI in 2015. I also interviewed 21 men while they were currently incarcerated at the ACI for debt non-payment. And I observed 25 so-called ability to pay hearings in the superior and district courts to try and just get a small sample of some first-hand understanding of how I saw magistrates and clerks fulfilling the legislation. So I found that even in 2015, debtors in Rhode Island were still making up 16% of commitments to the ACI annually. So just a 1% reduction to the 2008 number that Nick found. So that means that year over 1,500 Rhode Islanders were committed to the ACI for at least one night simply for failure to pay court debts, not associated with any other new warrants or charges. And I estimate that at least 50% of them probably should have had their costs either waived or lowered because of their indigency. So I was able to determine that 45% of them were unemployed at the time of their arrest. More of them likely qualified for one or more of those eligibility criteria for fee reduction that the public defender's office representative went over. Among the 21 men I interviewed at the ACI, at the time we were there, 10 of them were receiving food stamps, and 5 more of them were homeless at the time of their arrest. So that's a vast majority of the people, admittedly among a small sample, that I encountered, who likely shouldn't have been arrested for this issue. So these people, despite lack of consistent income, owed an average of $1,000 to the judiciary in 2015, ranging person to person from $10 to over $10,000. And as Nick shared, most of them are spending just 1 to 2 nights in jail because that is a measure of progress that's been taken in the last 8 years. But the range is still wide based on a variety of reasons. 2 people were still jailed for over 20 days in 2015 simply for court debts. And so the reason that these people are still entangled in the justice system is because the courts, to my knowledge, are not systematically assessing ability to pay. So in the 25 ability to pay hearings that I witnessed in the 3rd and 6th district courts and the Providence Superior Court, which process the majority of these defendants, I did not witness a single magistrate ask a single defendant in front of them about any of the eligibility criteria that are outlined in the law, so food stamp receipt, social security receipt, etc. I also talked to court clerks to find out if there's something else that's happening outside of the conversation with the magistrate. They shared with me that the judiciary's primary method for assessing ability to pay was to query defendants live in court. And I didn't see any other kind of instrument presented to me at that time. So admittedly, this was 3 years ago, but I would certainly echo my colleagues in wanting to see data on whether this ability to pay assessment is taking place. In 2015, only 3% of defendants in my study had their costs waived or reduced. And so that's far below the estimated at least 50% that I think would probably qualify for this. And so I found that the majority of defendants with court debts who were incarcerated had originally been charged with non-violent misdemeanor offenses like vandalism, driving with a suspended license. So these are 80% of these people had not been incarcerated for their original crime, but they were being incarcerated for debt non-payment. And so they had been trying to make prior payments. On average, they had made 3 prior payments on their fees, but if they missed 1 monthly payment date, they automatically got a warning or incarcerated. I think Nick spoke very well to the kind of cost-benefit side of this, which I found as well. So I found in my study that just 20% of people who we arrested and incarcerated for 1 to 2 nights ultimately paid off their total fees within 6 months of arrest. And only half of them made any payment at all within 1 month. So it doesn't seem like this method is an effective way of collecting fees from this group of people. And that's why I'm here to support this bill, because I think it would fulfill the original promise of the law by ensuring that courts are systematically assessing defendants' ability to pay and ensuring that people will be less likely to be arrested and incarcerated if that assessment hasn't taken place. I think this will ensure that Rhode Island continues to be a leader in the country in preventing modern-day debtors' prison. And I think it will help people who have been involved in the criminal justice system successfully transition back out to leading more productive lives.
Thank you. Any questions?
During your time with the judiciary, is there any way you could judge how well informed the employees of the judiciary are on the original legislation? I mean, do you get, was there a, I guess what I'm getting at, was there a sense that maybe just they're not necessarily aware? I mean, there's a lot of laws on the books. You can't expect everybody to know exactly what's going on all the time. And it goes the same thing for the people that are tasked with enforcing the laws. So I'm just wondering if that could be a potential.
Yeah, of course. So in the interviews that I completed, I certainly did some educating about the law live to make sure that wasn't the case, and got a range of responses ranging from magistrates believing that everyone should have some obligations to pay no matter what, and that's why they weren't querying, versus, you know, other people just thinking it was enough to ask people what their monthly income is and going off of that. And so, you know, I think that there might be an educational opportunity, but I think that this proposed bill to kind of standardize a financial assessment instrument would probably be the most direct way of educating folks about what they should be asking for.
Any other questions? Thank you for your testimony.
I didn't submit my 150-page paper into the record, but I am happy to share it with anyone who would like to see it.
Thank you, Rachel.